Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. I greet you live from North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America, and we're here today to talk about global affairs, a turbulent world economically, politically, continuing accelerated innovation in artificial intelligence and what it's going to mean for the future of the world and humanity. But today, I want to just give a few updates in the world. Oil prices climbed further on Wednesday to $90 a barrel. Russia and Saudi Arabia are saying they're going to limit output. This is concerning. The White House, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, says that arms negotiations between North Korea and Russia are advancing, but many skeptics wonder if this is really the case. According to the gloom surrounding the German economy, industrial orders fell by 11.7%. And there are concerns that Australia's economy is also slowing down because of China's slower growth. They get much of their iron and ore from Australia, and so this concerns the Australian economy. A couple of other issues. A cyclone in Brazil killed 22 people. Mexico City's mayor is speculated to be the next presidential candidate in Mexico. And there's just a lot. And then the final issue, big issue, is that Donald Trump, former President Trump, will not be attending his arraignment in person. With that being said, the news of the day before I open up the panel, really, really great victory in the United States Open yesterday as Ben Shelton, at the age of 18, has come in unseeded to reach the semifinals of the United States Open yesterday with a win over Francis Tiafoe. This has many people wondering about whether college tennis is returning as a place to grow professional tennis players. We often forget that Arthur Ashe came from college tennis, Jimmy Connors came from college tennis, and let's not forget John Patrick McEnroe, who was a stalwart at Stanford, along with his brother Patrick McEnroe. We've had John Isner, who just retired, coming from the Georgia Bulldogs, and now Ben Shelton, the son of Brian Shelton, who I actually saw when I was playing tennis at Emory University. He was the number one player at Georgia Tech, ended up coaching Florida State, where his son Ben played as a stalwart player, and now he finds himself in the semifinals of the U.S. Open. A great story. Two African-American men, black men, playing in Arthur Ashe Stadium, and now one of them is only 2 matches away from the U.S. Open title. But he has one challenge in front of him. Novak Djokovic, the GOAT, the greatest player of all time at 23 majors. And of course, Carlos Alcaraz, the rising star, number 2 player in the world, but many say the next GOAT to be in waiting. Unbelievable. If you haven't seen Alcaraz play and you love to watch tennis, I would tune in and watch him this afternoon, or I think he plays this afternoon in Flushing Meadows. But anyway, good luck to Ben. We're proud of you. Who knows? Maybe we'll see history in the making. So with us today, we have Mark Lee. I'm going to bring him in, and I'm going to be here for a few minutes today. Got to work today. Got to keep the economy moving. But Mark, thank you for being with us. And we're going to be bringing in some guests next week. Kerry has a pro tournament. Kerry, we're going to bring in on Ted Reese, who runs a tournament. They're coming from the U.S. Open to play in Kerry at the Kerry Tennis Park. So we're excited about that. And we have with us Shaquille Latimer.
We've also got Nick Palveda, the boss of the network, and Sasha Starr as well. And Lee New Rhodes is hanging in the cut, so we'll see if he pops in later on and if anybody else shows up as well and all in that space. But definitely got some great folks here that can talk about tennis and a number of other things as well. You mentioned Arthur Ashe. I think Arthur Ashe probably was starting his play even before college and all along those lines, because I know that he had a match against the Algonquin Club, which was a club here that is a community club that existed here in Durham, and it was a historical one in the African American community. I don't think it still exists, but it was very much part of that Durham Hayti legacy and all along those lines.
Right.
But definitely he played at a young age, probably even
And
before.
it's exciting because we also have Coco Gauff, who's the rising star, who's now in the semifinals. So, and it's also celebrating 50 years of equal pay with Billie Jean King. And let's not forget Daniil Medvedev, who is also in semis, and Zverev, who is actually a Canadian player, right, Sasha? Is Zverev?
No, he's German player. All right. And the small corrections that Ben Shelton is 20 years old.
Oh, 20. Okay.
Makes him the same age as Alcaraz and the Sinner. So there is a great rivalry. It's brewing right there.
Yeah, they say that he's really tired. It's not looking good for Zverev, and that he was up till 5 a.m. the night before last after his match. And sometimes it takes a day or two to recover. So hopefully he's ready to play Alcaraz today, but some people think he might be too tired, so we'll see.
Right.
But,
now, you are praising the equal pay in this Grand Slam tournaments.
50 years.
This is 50 years. It's a real hoax because obviously the men's matches such much harder. They are 5 setters most of the times. And some of these women's masters, they have absolutely no interest whatsoever when one girl beats the other one 6-0 in 15 and a half minutes. It's, I'm so sorry. This is real.
I actually have to agree with you, Sasha. This equal pay is a hoax. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay. Remember, a lot of this is based on television revenue, how many eyeballs are watching it. And more people watch the men than they do the women's. Okay.
Absolutely.
And if you believe in this equal pay hoax, then you believe the ACC and the Ivy League should be paid as much as the SEC. And they're not. If you play for the SEC or you play for the Big Ten, you get more eyeballs than you do if you play for the ACC or the Ivy League. So all this equal pay stuff is a bunch of trash. I don't know why
I would propose something very interesting.
It makes everybody feel good. But other than that,
it's feel good stuff. I agree. If you take a Grand Slam, such as US Open or Wimbledon, doesn't matter what, any tournament, and hold them separately, one on one location for men and another one in another location for women, and you see eyeballs, how many eyeballs will watch men's Grand Slam and how many will watch women's Grand Slam. The proportion will be 10-1. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So what are we talking about this equal pay? It's absolute in sports. It's an absolute hoax. But for all the people that are listening that want to feel good, equal pay.
But I will say this: as a former
in reality, it's not happening.
We want to get an update from Sasha on Ukraine, but I want to hear from Shaquille. Shaquille's looking very serious today.
Is he making money? He's trading the U.S. dollar going down.
No, but real quickly, I will say this, and maybe we get Shaquille's opinion on this. I will say that the quality of play of the women and the level of play has considerably increased. When you watch these women play today, now maybe I do see your point, and I've never really quite thought about that. Is it fair to pay them as much as the men when the men's matches are 3 times as long? But I will say that the quality of the women's game, the level of play, how hard they're hitting the ball, how hard they're serving, I actually enjoy watching the women's matches more than I did even 10 years ago. And I feel like the depth is a lot better. So there's not as much disparity between the top players in the world, the top 20. They're all hitting the ball about the same. But I guess Billie Jean King still was courageous to lead this effort, and I guess some people believe it's a hoax, like you say. But anyway.
Hey, but we can relate to them more because who can relate to that? Remember that guy hit a 149-mile-an-hour serve?
Shelton.
Was that Shelton?
Yeah, but not this one.
Relate to that, Steve. He hit the ball like 150 miles.
I mean,
no,
that's
really more women's game. It's more normal.
149 miles an hour. I mean, And the funny thing is, I love Brad Gilbert's commentary. He calls it the fear hand. A fear hand, not a forehand.
About hitting harder, okay, this is debatable and there are no measurements being taken to discuss it seriously. But I want to tell you there is a great discrepancy between a level of commitment of best men players and all of women players who don't care. One could come and lose any match to anybody. Look at Swiatek, supposedly the greatest player, and she's losing to some kind of a Ostapenko without any fight whatsoever. Look at Rybakina, former champion. She lost without any fight. So the things are good. See, the problem with women is they are picking up a lot of easy money. They are not motivated to fight because how many Gucci purchases one girl can buy herself? 100, 700, what? They have no motivation. So they're coming to the court. Okay, they're trying. Oh, you can't win. Oh, my serve is not working today. Okay, so she's losing and she's going away. There is no fight. There is no even upsetting, so people would see, okay, she's really fighting. She's upset. No, she just walks away. She'll pick up her check for $750,000 anyway. So why does she care? So that's why after the match, they're both loving each other and kissing each other and so on, because one will pick $750,000, another one will pick up $1.5 million. Okay, that's done. Okay, we've done our job. Bye-bye. This is what women tennis player is today. They're making too much money. They are not motivated, period.
Sasha, hold on a second. So the sportsmanship thing is going on both men and women. The guys also will sometimes shake hands and do other things after the game.
But they're fighting. Before shaking hands, they will fight all the way.
And I think I've watched some of the women's matches, and there are some fighting going on in there as well. And by the way, definitely Shaquille may find this interesting, but in Forbes, there is a number of women's sports and all of that. But as of last year in 2022, 7 of the top 10 women that were making money in sports from Forbes were actually women, and they included definitely the Williams sisters and Osaki and a number of others, because at least corporate America is seeing that they have some sort of appeal, whether that's just strictly for women or whether that's for men as well. So they are definitely reaching out to the women to be their corporate sponsors and all along those lines. As a matter of fact, the Japanese Naomi Osaki made $51.1 million just off of the endorsements last year, and only 6 athletes earned more than her $50 million in off-court endorsements during that particular year. So a lot of the corporate America and corporate world is seeing that these folks can have a appeal, whatever that appeal is, and are definitely playing towards that appeal in terms of.
Hey, Mark, if I heard you right, did you use the word 50 million?
I did say 50 million.
That's way too much. I mean, this is where Ronald Reagan was wrong. We need to bring back the tax, 90% tax on incomes over $1 million. I mean, come on.
Absolutely.
So there's nobody who's worth like $50 million.
But I'll tell you why Osaka was able to generate such large sums of money from corporate sponsors. No, because she's playing actually lately. She was losing all her matches in 2 sets, and she was gone in a matter of 40 minutes. But she has a great presence on social media. And the social media, so the corporate sponsors, they understand that, okay, she's a loser, she's going to go on court and she will lose in 40 minutes. That's not a big deal, because on a corporate sponsorship, there is a big valuation is done to social media. And when people will yapping about her race, about her affiliations, about your pregnancies or whatever else, some other stuff will generate a lot of traffic on social side, and this is why she's valuable. Most of the women, they're not that valuable. So take it yesterday. What was the winner? Muchova from Czech Republic. Okay, she beat whoever she beat, Kir Christie from Romania. They don't have presence on social media. Nobody talks about their pregnancies or boyfriends or so on. So what's the value of that? Okay, they were playing for something 45 minutes.
Let's
So
look at
what?
another world issue.
5 minutes, is it worth $1.5 million? Come on, it's a
Let's
joke.
open up some other issues, although we're going to bring in Shaquille to talk a little bit about Australia's economy currently. But Shaquille, we do miss the Australian tennis players. Where's Kyrgios? Miss the old days of Pat Rafter, Pat Cash, and of course Leighton Hewitt, the last Grand Slam player to be 5'9" and win a major. There's no more. No, they're all 6-footers. But anyway, Shaquille, what's going on in your neck of the woods in Australia? What are you thinking out there?
Maybe we should take Nick's ridiculous advice. We know that 90% tax rates didn't work in America. That's why he wants to bring them back, like any moronic Democrat would propose. So I suggest, I hope Nick's still backstage and come back on and defend himself. But look, our economy is weakening, I suppose. It's been weakening for a while. Our inflation rates are lower, so that has put a bit of downward pressure on interest rates, which is a good thing. I think we'll be okay. I think as the world starts to increase, building and all that sort of stuff, the Australian mineral exporting industry, it's a backbone of Australia, really, and I think they'll bounce back. So I think Australia, we've been in a bit of a downtrend for a while, but I don't see it's been too bad. I think our tax rates are relatively competitive around the world. I think we're an attractive country. So as long as you're not in my line of work, I guess Australia's a good place to be.
Hey, Shaquille, I know that we brought this up before. I want to get back to one other athletic thing. I know we've got other world editions, like world issues, serious world issues to get to as well. But when I was looking online, speaking of social media, there was a big conversation that was going on yesterday about another sport that is very popular, particularly during the Olympics, that being gymnastics. And part of the reason is that there was a lot of conversation around it was because there was a first time ever, and a lot of people were praising this. Some folks will be like, what difference does it make? Because it is not anything that we should be touting. I know me and Shaquille have had arguments about this and everything, but part of what happened is that at the U.S. Gymnastics Championships in Tampa over this past weekend, the championships were swept by young African-American women. So there were 3 young African-American women between the ages of 17 and 21 that claimed the top 3 spots. And some folks were saying that this was the first time that 3 Black female gymnasts swept the podiums. And like I said, there was a lot of talk about how this could be a major push, because apparently there's been a lot of not just tennis academies, but gymnastic academies that have been put up in the inner cities as a way to get out in terms of, and not just the traditional sports that go on, whether that's women's basketball or whether that's with the man being football and basketball and to some degree baseball. But I was just wondering what folks' thoughts about that are, because there was a lot of conversation on social media that was praising the fact that this was the first time that this had ever happened, and there were folks that were hoping that this would be encouraging more people to go into a sport that is not as popular among the young African-American women. And all along those lines, it's kind of that representation matters conversations that we've had in this space and everything. And there was a lot of conversation around Black Girls Magic.
Shaquille's favorite topic, diversity and inclusion. Smile, Shaquille, you look so serious.
Well, I'm just listening because I'm waiting for the next attack on me. You know, I find it so fascinating that the diversity and inclusion crowd doesn't even attempt to give a shit when minor minorities like the ones that I'm a part of don't have any representation. And then people will say, oh, well, just because it doesn't apply to Shaquille, rah, rah. You know, okay, look, if it really is true what you just said, Mark, that three African-American girls have achieved this, the first ones to achieve this gymnastics success, I think that's fantastic for them. But what do you expect people in Fiji and Australia and New Zealand to be doing? Like, oh, wow, like 3 people from a race that we're not part of in a country that we're not citizens of, that most of us have never been to, are up on the podium. Wow, I find that so inspiring. And this is the sort of rubbish that you guys push out of America onto the rest of us. I'm not sure
it's
what
America's
sort of
obsession with racism.
Unrelenting alacrity you're expecting me to show in relation to this.
So much.
It's just America's obsession with
part of it.
We're a
As I
very
said
racist
before,
country.
it can also encourage folks that are in. Mentioned it happened in tennis. Y'all talk about tennis. There was a rise in African American tennis players. I want to say that there was that this is the most African Americans that were in kind of the push toward the finals at the U.S. Open in history as well. So that is partially because of that. That's partially because there have been pushes in communities that were not having major tennis facilities like a Houston, like in New York, to get more people into a sport that they were not in the past doing and everything. And some people may be looking at a way that this could be.
Mark, that's fantastic.
Racism
How is that supposed to be inspiring for anybody else around the world? I don't see you in America saying that Australia just had, an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander member who achieved some great sporting thing. It's the first person in their race to have done it. How inspiring is that for the African American community in America? Because it's ridiculous.
Hold on a second, Shaquille. We said that we saw that with Catherine Freeman. We saw that with Catherine Freeman.
Catherine Freeman was the supposed to hang on to every word said by Americans about your domestic racial issues and inequalities. It's ridiculous. What am I supposed to do? Yeah, this is great. Three people I don't know.
What about
I know nothing about have achieved something.
Oh yeah,
wow, I'm inspired. You know what I'm going to do, Mark? I'm going to go and buy a leotard tomorrow and go straight down to the gym and learn gymnastics because I'm so inspired. Sasha Starr might join me. Sasha, I'll get you a leotard. We'll have some fun.
Hold on a second. I have to push back on something you said. I have to push back on something you said, Shaquille, because I do remember years ago when Catherine Freeman, the young Aborigine, was a major track star, and a lot of people were encouraged by her run and the fact that she was going up. I think it was against FloJo at that particular time and everything, and a lot of folks were inspired by her run and also her story because she was an Aborigine that was having success in a part of the world that a lot of folks didn't even know the Aborigine history and all of that of Australia. So a lot of people were learning about what was going on in your part of the world because of her run. So sometimes we talked about it yesterday. Information can be key to a lot of these conversations, including some political conversations.
Look, people don't have time to listen and learn every single story. People are busy doing their own things, right? If what you're trying to suggest is that people are inspired by this, I don't want to rain on your parade. If you think this is fantastic, you go for it. It's fine. I'm not really, I'm not going to sit here and wow, it's amazing. It really makes my day because I'm not going to do it. So I don't feel that way. And frankly, if there is a child or a young person out there who's running or doing gymnastics, doing the bloody roly-poly, whatever the kids do, and they happen to be better than anybody else in their age group. But then they look at it and they go, well, in 2023, I don't feel I can get ahead. And then a 16-year-old kid wins an award and they go, oh, well, before that happened, I really didn't think that I could ever get there. But now I actually feel that I can. Right? If that's really the case, one, I think that those people need some serious help. Right, and the people around them need to stop putting them down. And second, if that really is true, if the basic premise of your idea is that unless there is representation, people of those minority communities don't feel as though they can achieve anything, then I would really like you to address what I have brought up over and over and over again. What about a mixed-race Japanese Aboriginal person that has migrated to the United States? I bet that's a pretty small minority. Should those children then feel like, well, because we have absolutely zero representation in American society, we can't possibly achieve anything? If that really is the case, then what you'd be suggesting is that nobody other than those minorities which are represented should ever want to move to the United States. I don't think the US is that kind of country. I think the US is a wonderful country that provides opportunities for everybody. So I'm not going to rain on your parade. If you're excited by this and you think it's really inspiring, that's great. I got shit to do. I'm not going to sit around looking this up and going, wow, well, that's amazing. I'm so, it's this incredible, what an achievement. I'm just not interested.
And like I said, that's your opinion. Like I said, the reason I even heard about it is because it was blowing up on social media and all along those lines. So like I said, I don't necessarily follow gymnastics until the Olympics because it is one of those sports that is more known around the time of the Olympics and all along those lines. And I definitely don't follow the national championships and all in that space, but there was a lot of conversation and there were people that were being inspired by it. There's a whole hashtag that goes on called Black Girls Magic. And there's a number of folks that are looking at things that are successful among the African-American women. And that is where the hashtag came from. And they even look at everybody from our political leaders to our sports leaders to our entertainment leaders, and there's a number of others that are part of that hashtag. I'm not going to knock those folks that have that hashtag and use that as a form of inspiration. Because like I said, I think that we can get inspiration from a variety of sources and a variety of places.
But can I assume then that white people are not supposed to be inspired by it then? White people should be inspired when a white person achieves something. Would you hold that standard?
Like I said, if you got people that are being inspired because it is something that they are not used to seeing.
Let me just finish the question. Which people exactly is it that you think should be inspired? If it's people of any minority, then what you're suggesting is that people who have no representation should be inspired by the biggest minority group in the United States achieving something, regardless of whether smaller minority groups within that community have gotten anywhere. It doesn't make sense. That's why I don't play these identity politics games, because it's divisive, it's hurtful, and it does make a lot of people feel like they're completely left out and that their successes are not ever going to be celebrated.
Okay, but I have another issue that I think is a pretty important that came out in the Wall Street Journal today, and this is deals with your friend Joe Biden, who can't find any dollar left unspent. Okay, so and this is a whole liberal agenda. Internet costs $60 billion. And what he wants to do is internet for all and deliver them to households like in the middle of the desert somewhere. The cost per house is about $50,000 per house to deliver the internet service to that. Now, your friend Joe Biden, and I know Steve left, who's a good friend of Joe, doesn't understand that America is $31 trillion in debt. Doesn't understand just because you live in the middle of some bloody desert, you're not entitled to good internet service. I'm sorry. It's like, I'm going to move to the middle of the desert, and you know what? I want to have a Costco next door, a Publix next door. I want internet service to be 5G. I want the government to provide it all. Now, what got me on this kick is, of course, the federal government's $31 trillion in debt. And
aren't you the person that just clownishly suggested a 9% tax rate over $1 million?
Hey, look, I lived out in the middle of boonies. Mark, you're not entitled.
Nick, hold on a second. There is a conversation, and this one, Shaquille may agree with me, he may not, but there's a conversation about
I won't.
I just said that you may not. There is a conversation about the digital divide that goes on in the world, including digital divide that is around the world in different parts of the nation and everything. And I know that one of Shaquille's favorite documents is the International Bill of Human Rights. I think I called it by the right name and everything. And I think that there are certain things that are basically required in that they say are necessities, whether that is food, whether that is water. And a lot of people would argue that because of the nature of communications and because of the nature of what is going on in society, that the internet is just as vital as some of those other things, maybe not as much as survival.
I've got exactly the article that you're referring to, Article 25 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And I would love for you to tell me where in this document it says anything about internet service.
I didn't say it did. I'm just saying that my question to you as the rest of the panel is internet service a issue that most people should be needing to have connections to and everything, because what we talk about is the world being a connected world. If the world is a connected world, then don't we need to make sure that all of the world has the connections that we are talking about? We want to leave the people out of the Amazons alone because they are choosing to be in the Amazons and everything, because that is one of the areas that is impacted.
Let's clarify your question. Because of inequities in the United States, which is easily fixed by things like Starlink and satellite internet services, etc. Because of inequities with telecommunications and internet in the United States, we in the West should pay for and create accessible internet across the world in very remote parts. So if we've got like some tribe who doesn't even have a computer or a laptop or a mobile phone in sub-Saharan Africa, we in the West should what, go and build them internet infrastructure? Is that your suggestion? Because if it's a human right, then we would have some obligation to provide it to them, right?
My question is, how much of a human right is it? I'm not saying that it is or isn't. I'm asking you, how much is it? And if we want communication, I mean, we can go back to the drum signals if you want, because a lot of the countries are still doing
it. When you say what degree is it a human right, you either have a human right or you don't. You don't have part of a human right. The Eighth Amendment of the United States doesn't say, well, look, you've got the right to sort of not be punished cruelly and inhumanely. No. You have a human right that you are not going to, or a U.S. Bill of Rights, that you can't be treated inhumanely. Like cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, you don't have part of a right. You don't sit there and say, well, look, I want a lawyer. I'm going to exercise my Sixth Amendment right. And the police say, well, what degree of right do you have? When you say you want a lawyer, what about a law student? What about, I don't know, we get some dropout from high school that did an essay.
I think it's a dangerous rabbit hole if you want to go down there, a physical human right, whether it's housing, whether it's clothing, whether it's internet.
But hold on a second. One of the things that we always complain about on this show, and we complained about it several times, is the impact of China and what China is doing. If we don't provide the internet to those other folks, will not China go down there? And
that's a separate story, but someone has a right to your services and goods.
Let them go down and do it. We don't. We're going $60 billion in the hole to provide internet service to podunk.
Hold on a second.
And by the way, Shaquille,
hold on a second. The idea of a 90% tax rate on anything over $1 million, make it 99%, and then that way you can all be poor together. I mean, that would solve it.
Shaquille, hold on a second. I want to get back to something you asked me earlier, because it comes out of your favorite document and everything. And I did look it up, because actually, and yes, I know you get tired of me and Jacoby looking up things, but 7 years ago, before the pandemic, the UN declared. Hold on a second.
No, don't.
No, hold on a second. So 7 years ago, the UN declared that it considers the internet to be a human right.
In order to contradict.
I'm just telling you what I looked up, and they said the UN declared that it considers the internet to be a human right. Specifically, in addition, was made to Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes the freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Section 32 adds the promotion, protection, and enjoyment of human rights on the internet. And another 15 recommendations that cover the rights of those who work in and rely on internet access.
Mark, you are clearly spending significantly too much time with Jacoby, because you are twisting what the United Nations has said. What the United Nations has said, and specifically the United Nations is actually referring to the complaint, which was led by Europe, that people who had things that they wanted to say that they were trying to express on the internet were finding that their access to the internet was being limited. That is not the same as conferring a positive right where government or international agencies are obliged to provide people with the means of survival, which is generally limited to food, shelter, healthcare, education, and other things to sustain life. That is the normal positive rights that are imbued by these documents. Negative rights, which prevent the government from doing things to you, such as hurting you and harming you and discriminating against you, are also very important. What you are trying to do is trying to twist the meaning of that to suggest that it's a human right, that the internet should be provided to every person on this planet. And I can tell you that most governments do not have the luxury of the wealth or the amount of debt that Western countries are able to get into, and can't afford to provide internet to everybody. So I think that the notion that you are making is absurd, and it certainly is not in line with what the United Nations Charter has stated.
Mark, an American who lives in the sticks, in the middle of nowhere, the government should give him free internet?
I mean, there is some conversations about the government at least making internet accessible. Now, whether that is making it accessible in public, whether that's making it accessible in public places, or whether that's giving them free internet. I never said that they should have internet in their house, and anybody that said that, I said that it would be to twisting my words and everything. I'm just saying that the part of the conversation is, do we make internet accessible to folks
Part of
that
what
don't have?
conversation? Where is this being driven? Who's having this conversation? With everything that's going on in the United States right now, with rising debt levels, you're scheduled now to have a $2 trillion deficit. You've got $170 trillion in unfunded liabilities. You have a rising conflict with Russia and the Ukraine, the end of which is nowhere to be seen. You have potential issues between China and Taiwan. You have issues with US military equipment being outdated, falling numbers, and a less ready military. You have the police under attack, a judicial system which is out of control, a political system that doesn't seem to be able to get anything done. Who exactly is having the conversation about needing to have internet access all over the most remote parts of Kansas and Nebraska?
A lot of times it is the political leaders of those individual states that are being pressured for whatever reason.
Well, then let them do it. Well, then let them do it. If you happen to be in a state that has poor levels of internet infrastructure and investment, then you should encourage it. Give a tax break to AT&T and Verizon or whoever, and get them to come in and build out the infrastructure that you want. Well, what do you want? You want the international community to do it? Do you want Australia to fund it for you? What do you want? If it's an international human right provided by the United Nations and enforced by the United Nations, okay, through diplomatic or any other channels, then the IMF and the World Bank, which is funded primarily by the United States, but also by many other countries, should then provide the US with the funding that they require to build internet in Nebraska. Come on now.
Well, I mean, part of the conversation, I'll just use North Carolina as an example, and Nick can contradict me or not if he knows more about it, because he probably does. But I know that one of the big conversations was happening here in the state that I live in, the state that Nick and Steve live in as well, and other folks that are sometimes on the show, was around Google Fiber, because Google Fiber was definitely making internet more accessible in places that didn't always have internet, including some of our rural towns and all along those lines. Now, whether that is a Google initiative or whether they are getting the support of the state and everything else, that is something that folks would need to tell me, and all along those lines.
Isn't that rather selfish of you, Mark, to sit there in such a wealthy country and complain about these issues? If it's really true, why aren't you saying to Google, look, North Carolina, we're a pretty good state. We're pretty closely connected to a number of other states. We should be all right. What you should really do is give the internet to the poor First Nations people in Saskatchewan, who are so far remote from the rest of Canada that internet service is really difficult up there. We here in America, we're the greatest country on earth. We're this wealthy, rich group of people. Don't worry about us in North Carolina. Please, Google Fiber, go up to Saskatchewan and build it up there.
Well, apparently Google is doing that because hold on a second. Apparently Google is doing that because they're building a submarine cable across the Pacific Ocean, which goes from Canada to Asia. So they are actually working in that level to try to get internet to other parts of the world that don't necessarily have it right now.
Your response to me about making internet accessible to people living in Saskatchewan is that Google is doing it because they're building an undersea cable to connect Canada to Asia. Mark, come on now.
Part of it is they're trying to connect part of the greater world and all of that, which is my only question is, the internet is becoming a part of the...
I think we need to have an intervention.
Is becoming part of the global universe.
I think we need to have an intervention about how much time you're spending with Jatovy, right? Because these are some of the most fallacious arguments.
They're fallacious. I'm just saying that I'm looking up stuff like anybody else can. That's part of what a journalist does. I don't know what your background is. Your background is in finance. So I'm doing what journalists do, which is looking up information and all in that space.
I have a background in finance too. And let me tell you, this is what they call waste. It's part of the government waste, fraud, and abuse.
Nick, you're the one that wants to give them more to do it with. You want a 90% tax rate.
Well, that's to reduce the national debt, Shaquille. See, the real problem is America thinks they can afford to send cable wire.
Nick, let me ask you something, Nick.
Kansas, and let
me just ask you something. Do you really believe under Republicans or Democrats, right? Both the cheeks of the same ass. Do you really believe that these people, if you give them more money, are going to spend only the extra money they've got? They'll just go, wow, we got an increase in the amount of revenue you've got. That means that we can borrow another 50 billion or 100 billion. You really think they're going to curb their spending? If you give them
that's the reason David Walker said you have to have a constitutional amendment to curb the national debt. if you allow Congress, because you got a lot of people like Mark, I love Mark, but a lot of people like that there's no dollar in the federal government that cannot be spent. You got to spend more spent. Okay. Because of that, you do have to have a constitutional amendment say, no, we are not going to spend our way into oblivion. And the only way you can do it is a constitutional amendment, because the minute they go to Washington, D.C., and Steve knows
Hey, and speaking of Washington,
they're bringing money.
Guys, I got to leave early, but I'll be back tomorrow. But the reason I had to leave was I got a call. I'm getting so many calls about fundraisers in December for the governor, for the congressman, for the Senate. I'm going to take everyone on World Edition. Let's all go to Washington, D.C. We'll go to a bunch of fundraisers. We'll party. We'll hang out in the Capitol Hill. We're going to go.
I look forward to it. Sasha and I will sign Sasha up on his behalf, because the great thing about it, Sasha, is we can go down there, go to their fundraisers, eat the great finger food and all that, which is being provided by the other donors. And then you and I can just sit there and go, look, I'm sorry, but they come to ask us with their hat out or their machine. And we go, oh, look, I'm sorry. Sasha's Canadian. I'm Australian. We can't donate. I like
the idea, Steve, but I got a question for everybody on the panel, because apparently y'all are attacking me for looking up stuff and everything, but there was a bipartisan infrastructure law. Nick, you'll love this. It's law and everything, and it involves the Democrats, the Republicans, and the Independents, because they're creating what they're calling the Affordable Connectivity Program, which provides eligible households $30 per month off their internet bill, so they can receive a one-time discount of up to $100 to purchase a laptop, desktop, computer, or tablet from participating
the government has no business
providers. Should this be something we shouldn't be doing? And everything?
No, you shouldn't do it. It's a dreadful idea. And you shouldn't do it. Let me tell you why. Because if I'm that poor person in that community who can't afford internet and can't afford to have a laptop, you offering to give me $30 a month so I can have internet, I probably have other priorities that are way, way, way more important to me if I don't have $30 a month to spare. As Sasha Starr routinely points out, the average family in America doesn't have $400 in their pocket. So if that's the case, what you're doing, and this is what government always does, you're taxing the people. You're taking their money, and then you're saying, look, rather than just not taking it, letting you keep your money, we're going to take it, but look how good we are. We're going to give you it back, but only for you to spend on the thing that we want you to spend it on. Oh, and by the way, for the privilege of having us do this thing for you, we're going to take some of that money as well as a fee. As a fee for us.
Shaquille,
what we'll do is just like you did with the
Shaquille and Steve, hold on a second. I know you got to run, but let's get off the internet for a second, because I know that, like I said, as y'all know, I get around by mass transit and everything. I've seen several young folks and even older folks that are rushing to find whatever they can with it used to be called the Obama phone, but it's got some new name now, because they are wanting to be able to be in touch with their relatives, their friends, for all I know, they might be in touch with their dealer and everything, but they are wanting to get the free phone and everything. So is that something that the government should not have done? And is that something that should not be done? Because a lot of people are rushing out. I know that I've run into at least 3 or 4 people in the last week that were trying to go to some mall or something to pick up their latest phones. In some cases, they were trading in their old phone.
That's right. The government shouldn't have done it. The same way that Australia comes up with these ridiculous ideas that we come up with. You know, what we're going to put a tax on this, but then we're going to give you a subsidy off your electricity bill. And blah. Just don't tax me in the first place. There's a solution. Just don't take it off me in the first place. But taking money off somebody, giving it back to them, but only giving it to them if they spend it on what government thinks you should spend it on. I'm almost 40 years old. If my mother tried that, we'd have a wicked Barney about it. I mean, well, she does try it sometimes. She tries to tell me what I shouldn't spend my money on. But don't tell me what I must spend my money on. I need to have a bunch of politicians, right, who have an IQ. I'm not even going to get there. They certainly are not as intelligent as I am, I don't think, who can tell me what I should and shouldn't do with my life and my money that I earned, not because of any assistance from them, but despite the roadblocks that they've put in front of me. I've managed to earn it, and now they want to tell me what to do. No.
But I mean, look, I'm not a parent, but I know part of the conversation with the whole notion is that it gives parents ways to stay in touch with their kids if their kids are going through a number of things. We know a lot of our kids are having troubles with their
give them the money.
mental health
Give
and a
them the
number of
money.
other things. So are you saying that if these programs can be afforded and if the phone companies want to provide them, that they shouldn't provide them? Because I think that in some cases, phones are being provided. Sometimes they're knockoff phones and all along those lines. So are you saying that if they can't afford to give out these phones, that they shouldn't give out these phones?
Don't change the goalposts.
I didn't change the goalposts. I'm just saying how the programs are run.
Okay, I'll respond to you. Let me tell you, if private organizations, if private telcos think it's in their best interest, for advertising or whatever reason they have, to give free or discounted phones out, that's great. You want to extol the great benefits, such as parents being able to stay in contact with the kids. That's fine. Give them the $100. Give them the money then. Give them the money, and if they think that staying in contact with their kids is so much of a priority, they'll go down to Walmart, buy one of those prepaid phones for $50 with $20 worth of credit in it, and you've got the problem solved. But what you want to do is you don't want to give that family the choice. You don't want to just give them the $100 because you're worried that they might go and spend it on something else which is far more important to them. So instead, you're going to say, well, we're going to give you the $100, but only if you buy the phone. And then what you have is you have a situation like just what happened with your milk. You've got a big private company. It begins with T. I forget who they are, Tyrone or whoever it is, who had the contract to produce milk. You had people that would buy it because they had the food stamps and all the different programs, WNA or whatever it is, the WASP or whatever the programs are. Okay, who could only buy that milk. They could only use those vouchers to buy milk from that company. It might have been Tyson's, yes. Who could only use the vouchers to buy milk from that supplier. So they'd go to the local grocery stores and they would only buy milk from that supplier. Now, what happened? What happened was after that supplier lobbied government for that special treatment, other companies didn't have the same sort of economy of scale. They didn't have the same market share, so they reduced the amount of milk products, baby formula, that they were able to produce. And then what happened? Well, there was a problem in one of your factories over there. There was some sort of scare with the quality of the milk products. And all of a sudden, the United States, the great US of A, is running around asking Canada for milk, asking Australia for milk, asking the UK for milk, because of why? Not because your country didn't have enough milk, not because your country doesn't have enough capacity, but because of stupid behavior by government.
But I hear your point and everything, but
this is why what you need is government to just get out of the way. If they want to give you funding for it, tell them just to give you the money, and you can choose how best that money would supplement your life.
I would agree.
No, but Nick and Shaquille, my question to you, and this is a question that I hear from a number of my friends that are from foreign countries and all along those lines. And yes, I do have some of those, Shaquille, not just you and everything, but their question that they raise is that a lot of the times they are getting these high price cards, and a lot of times these cards are seen as a gouge by some of the folks because they're going out and buying these prepaid cards that are oftentimes seen as a waste and almost like the lottery, that they are causing issues in terms of the funding and the amount of money that is being spent on them. Because I think that, like, in some cases you might spend, and I'm just using a hypothetical, you might spend $100 on these prepaid cards and be able to talk to your relative in Nairobi for 20 minutes and everything. And I thought you
wanted to encourage these people to stay in contact with people. What if you're a refugee who an asylum seeker or whatever, who's illegally crossed the border, across the Mexican border, and you want to contact back home? What are you going to do? Say, no, look, we're not going to fund. I mean, you're not consistent. But look, let me just come back to something.
No, I'm just asking. I was asking the question because that is the complaint that I've heard about those cards.
If you believe that the people who are poor don't have the capacity to make decent financial decisions that are in their own interests, right? They don't have the capacity to do that. Hence the reason why they're reliant on government support in the first place. Hence the reason why the government should step in order to dictate these aspects of their lives. You should support the idea that they shouldn't have a vote then. You should also support the idea that I facetiously floated past you a couple of years ago when I said to you, you should have socialism. Have socialism for all the people that are so inept in their lives that they need government to dictate every bit. Give them socialism. they can't make any decisions for themselves and give the rest of us free market capitalism who are prepared to survive on our own. And what we'll do, I can guarantee you, I can win over the free market lot by saying to them, look, we'll have to fund the socialist lot. So we're going to give X percentage. It's going to be a fixed rate, fixed percentage of the GDP that we generate. We're going to put it out there, but we get to tell these people exactly what to do at all times. Rather than this tipsy-topsy world where you've got, where you believe, apparently, that these people are so inept they can't decide whether to buy the low-priced or high-priced prepaid card, but they can collectively decide to vote on what I should do with my money because I'm in the top 1%. Oh, I don't think so, baby. If you can't control your life, don't tell me how to run mine.
First off, that was a very convoluted, long answer and everything.
I liked it.
You're going and all in that space and everything. But the main thing I was going to bring up is that it is not necessarily the government that is doing those cards that I mentioned. I want to say that they're private companies that are doing those cards and all along those lines. And it comes down to even like that conversation around predatory lending and whether there are people that are taking advantage of those that are poor, which is the point that I was making and everything. So now I said, if you don't think that that's an issue, then it's not an issue and everything. But that was what I was raising was, is that an issue if there are people that are taking advantage, whether it's predatory lending or whether it's some of these high priced cards that are going out and people are, like you just said, they want to reach out to their friends in Mexico or they want to reach out to their friends in the Congo or wherever and all in that lands. And are they being taken advantage of by some of these?
So your solution, hang on. So your solution is what? If they're being taken advantage of by private companies, to government to give them more money. This doesn't work. Look, I don't know what is going on in the minds of Americans. This doesn't work. The very fact that US people go to Canada to try to buy cheaper medication because Canada as a country negotiates with the pharmaceuticals and buys it en masse, as does, let me say, every other country on earth, or certainly every Western country on earth does. Right? And then you guys sit back, our healthcare system, these big price gouging companies. Well, why don't you just have the government negotiate with them as an entire block and get a mass discount, given that you're the largest economy in the world? If what you believe is that these telephone prepaid cards are being mispriced, get the government, state, federal, whoever, to come in and say, hey, we're going to buy the time off your network at X rate, which is consistent with what the commercial wholesale rate is, in order to provide the services to people that can't afford it.
Yeah, but you just said earlier, and one of the biggest complaints is
the money out of theirs.
No, I was saying you just said one of the biggest complaints is the what goes on with our government and everything, and you said it several times. I've said it as well. Is the lobbyists, and one of the most powerful lobbyists is the pharmaceutical lobby. So they're not going to do that in the United States, where they might do it in Canada and the rest of the world because they see an advantage to what they are doing in the United States with their relationship with the for-profit hospitals and everything.
But the solution that you're offering to this problem is to take the money out of the pockets of hardworking people. Or not hard, maybe they're just lazy and rich, whatever. You want to take the money out of their pockets in order to address the inequities caused by the lobbyists. Lee, I've gone for long enough. You've got something to say, I'm sure. Come on in.
That's okay, guys.
I'm getting ready to close out. I'm just soaking it in.
I want to get some thoughts and feelings from Lee before we go to Steve.
Specific to what? Obviously, private companies, they can do whatever they want. The government, whenever they take what you said before, take your money and then give it back to you, there's an overhead cost and there's inefficiencies there. It doesn't make sense.
That's right. What you're saying is absolutely true, Lee. The real problem is there's an administrative cost to putting these crazy programs together. You lose money when you do that.
And we're seeing it big time with healthcare now.
Yeah, it's 25% of what you spend on healthcare goes to administrative costs. So when you put these wonderful government programs together, everybody claps. Oh yeah, we spent more money. Now notice they spent more money, they didn't raise taxes to go pay for it because the Republicans would say no. So what they did is they put it on the credit card of America, which is now 31 trillion, and we just all ignore it like it doesn't exist.
So
Nick, Washington has a spending
problem. Let me understand
something. The
only
way to solve it is a constitutional amendment that says you cannot spend
Nick, that's not going to help.
That's not going to help. But Nick, let me just, and I definitely want to hear more from Lee, but I know y'all say that I changed the goalpost and everything, but Nick, and Lee, let me just make sure that I understand what y'all are saying as well, because I am part of a study, and I'll go ahead and admit it, is the study around transportation. I've just said on this show several times I get around by mass transit, and they're trying to figure out ways to make mass transit more efficient and all along those lines. And they're looking at everything from light rail to a number of other things, including beautifying the stands and some beautification programs and all along those lines. And some of those I find to be, what y'all are saying, possibly wasteful and everything. But are you saying that those kind of studies, whether those kind of community organizations, those kind of community outputs are not necessary and aren't important to do? Because I mean, like I said, I would actually encourage part of this because they want to get the citizens' input into people of us that are traveling by the bus and everything.
Mark, there's nothing you can do with public transportation to get politicians to take it.
Yeah, generally it's a waste.
Let me give you some advice. As somebody who's an international person that's structured all over the world, let me give you some advice. Okay, we're all banned on the show at the moment. I'm sure I'll get some backlash from some of the women watching. But I wouldn't suggest that anybody get married without a prenuptial agreement, right? Because otherwise, the woman's going to come up to you and she's going to say, look, we go half-half, right? My half is everything. Your half is all the debt, okay? Or they'll come up with some other weird and wonderful mathematics. And even while you're together, you know, they always want half of everything. And what I would say to you is treat the US government, or if you're not in the US, the Canadian government or the British government or whoever, pretty much the same way. And in the absence of being able to sign a prenuptial agreement limiting how much tax they take, you should structure yourself offshore and try to get yourself and your life outside of their grubby hands as far as is practically possible, unless you are in one of those sorts of jobs where you actually have to work with government and you actually have to be there. Otherwise, get yourself offshore, get yourself outside of their tax net, don't take any benefits from them, don't contribute, and just all out be a thorn in their side and contribute as little as possible to the wasteful politics. And if you feel
Shaquille, hold on a second.
There is an ethical problem. Feel free to spend your money on charitable things that you actually care about and believe in. Don't give it to the government.
No, but Shaquille, along those same lines, and I will state something else that I've talked about before. The arts organization that I work for, definitely, and there's several of them that I have worked for in the past, but I'll just talk about HATI. They get a tremendous amount of their money from government funding. So you are saying that I should go tell my bosses and everything at HATI not to apply for the various NEA and other kinds of funds and all along those lines? I didn't
say anything off the sort. These organizations are welcome to try to drink from the big, massive taxpayer trough of money, which is stolen at gunpoint from the taxpayer. The taxpayer is free to try to curtail the government's ability to take the fruits of their hard-earned labor as far as possible. And I am proudly one of those people that does everything he can to legally minimize my obligations to the government.
No, I got that, but you didn't answer my question. If the arts organization is
if you think that you can dip your hand into that trough or drink at the government teat, go for it. I have no problem with that. I'm happy to suck at the teat too, but I'm not going to contribute to it, which is why I generally don't suck at the teat.
I'm going to go ahead and close out and leave early. I just want to thank everyone for a wonderful show. We're going to try to bring in some guests next week and continue our discussion of these differences we have philosophically about our approach to government funding nonprofits. Of course, before we know it, the presidential election of 2024 is going to be here. So we're going to talk about Trump, DeSantis, what the Republican field is looking like, whether Joe Biden will be the nominee or will he surprise us and not run again? And if that's the case, will it be Kamala or is there somebody else in the wings waiting to hold the mantle of the Democratic Party? We do know that Donald Trump's still a 30-point lead. So right now, with all things even if he gets convicted, he could still run for the presidency. So this is something I think that's going to be interesting to track and see. So thank you all for being with me today. I'm going to leave
you a question before you close out. I just want to ask you a question. So let's just play the hypothetical. Let's say that Joe Biden decided not to run for president. Do Democrat candidates have the time to get up on stage, have a debate, go to primaries, etc.? What's exactly or is it simply going to be the DNC just says
well, Shaquille, it could. That's a good point, Shaquille. And I think one thing that could happen is that they may not have the time to do that, to get out there. So it could be doing a brokered convention where perhaps somebody else's name is put out there and they've got to get the delegates. There was a similar scene in House of Cards when Claire Underwood was going against Kathy Durant, the Secretary of State, and it was on the floor. So that might be what it is. There might be somebody out there that's a Democrat that's thrown out there, whether it's Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom. I can't hear many other Democrats out there. Kamala Harris, obviously, but I think there's enough Democrats against her that they would maybe fight her. And I don't know what the number of delegates is you'd have to get. So that could be it, Shaquille. It would be a shorter.
Well, I mean, I would imagine that if you put Gavin Newsom in there, a white man, or Gretchen Whitmer, a white woman from Michigan in there, and not Kamala, that would divide the Democrats for a while there. It would be, and I'm sure it would be quite upsetting to the base if they don't have a say in a primary vote.
Could be. One guy we don't talk a lot about is the former governor of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick, who's a little bit like Obama, an African American. Perhaps it could be Cory Booker, a United States senator, a black man, but a U.S. senator. I know you laugh, but I mean, he could, have a chance. Anyway, I think it's still, there will be.
I've told y'all before, Corey's got some issues. I told you that I've known folks that have known him from a family standpoint and other things. So I don't know that he could actually pull it off and everything, because there are definitely some issues around him. He has some Kamala type things that go on, and I can bring on some folks hopefully in the near future that can expound on that greater than I can and all along those lines. So I don't know that he would have. We'll get
an update on Ukraine tomorrow from Sasha.
Yeah, and Hakeem would be a great person. The only thing I was going to mention to Shaquille, I said I was going to mention it earlier, is more power to Australia, because apparently they're rescuing people left and right, because y'all did have that major rescue off of the folks that were falling off of a catamaran. And definitely that was rescued from a shark attack. So first y'all rescued people in Antarctica, now y'all rescuing people from sharks and all along those lines. So just wanted to praise your country for that.
Well, Antarctica's ours. We put a flag in there. It's the Australian Antarctic region. So we've got to have some obligation down there. And as for the sharks, we invented those guys. Part of Australia to be bitten by a shark.
Understood. And on that note, we'll get on out of here. I know that at 1:00 we've got the investment show with our great hosts from Canada, Sasha Starr and Milan, and I think Jim Eid will be there as well. So they'll be discussing investments and other things that folk can be looking at getting involved with if they're trying to make their own money and all along those lines. So looking forward to that conversation at 1:00. 1:00 Eastern.